let's open up Maaseh HaKorbanot and finish it up. And we have a lot to say about Bnei Noach this week. Why? Because this is where the Rambam introduces sacrifice for Bnei Noach. Can Bnei Noach offer sacrifice? We saw it before, yes. So what are the halachas? How does that work? We're in the 19th parak. I was talking about Asiya and Shchita and what the Ravid points out explicitly based on his bad text of the Rambam, that certain acts are considered Asiya and certain acts are considered Ha'alaya. So Shchita and throwing the blood are both under Asiya, and actually burning this sacrifice on his outdoor Mizbeach, where he shouldn't be burning it, that's considered burning it. Well, as long as it's a complete job. Okay. So let's read the 11th halacha. Ha'ala b'chazar v'ha'ala chayav al kol evar v'evar, or aver v'aver. Sometimes it's avar and sometimes it's aver. I don't know what rule they have for distinguishing between the two. Avar is spelled with a yud, and it's meal ra, and aver is meal el. Okay, 1 second. Someone wants to join us. Okay. So it means every limb, every single limb. Zarak v'hel chayav shtaim. And if he threw the blood on this altar and burned this limb on the altar, so he's hit with shtaim. Like we said, like the Ravad pointed out before, the verse has distinguished between ma'aleh, that means the act of burning. Why is it called elevation? Because the fire burns it up, right? It burns it, raises it up in smoke. And the oseh. The oseh is basically, like I said before, throwing the blood, slaughtering the services before the burning. Sharei Nemar asher ya'aleh olah. The pasuk refers to someone who might elevate a burnt offering. And it also says, to make it. Okay? Makes the korban and burns the korban. Two different actions. If he were to burn an aver that's missing something, it's not complete. Patur. So he's exempt from punishment. He's considered liable for something that was not something that was incomplete. And throughout the Torah, let's say, especially in Hilchot Shabbos, the Rambam says patur means after the fact, but it doesn't mean permissible. Okay, patur, exempt, aval asur, but still forbidden. Okay. If two people joined in, hold it, doesn't need both of them, but they just did a two-man job, so they are obligated. Why? It says ish asher yaleh olah uzavach. That this verse I would have said. So they split the deal, but it says ish. Now normally that means it's idiomatic meaning for any man or every man who would do such thing. What's the opposite of no one? Everyone or someone? Is there? I don't really. No. Grammatically speaking, it is. The opposite of no one is someone or every. You say it's everyone or anyone. I don't know. Okay. I spent a long time trying to figure this out. I guess this is why I'm not a math professor. Why? What did they say, Len? When zero of the fraction, so it's 0. 0 over 5 is 0. 0 over 10 is 0. 0 over a billion is 0. But any of those numbers over 0, when the 0 is the denominator, that's undefined. You can't divide by 0, whatever that means, right? And what does that do? It makes the calculator say, and there's a whole mathematical explanation of which I have yet to understand exactly how that works. Okay, dividing by 0. So normally, when you multiply something, it's dividing by the reciprocal, and we divide by something, it's multiplying by the reciprocal. But multiplying by 0 is not dividing by the reciprocal. Does 0 even have a reciprocal? Apparently not, right? It's a null thing, whatever that means. I don't understand it well enough to say that I could explain this to anybody. I'm sure there are people with greater minds, or quite a few, probably even some guys who are not present with us right now, but they study these things. They can explain to me. So I never understood it. So that's why I have trouble understanding what's the opposite of nothing, something, anything, or everything. Well, okay, so there you go. I give. I'm not saying it's a situation. I'm just trying to say that. Yeah, whoever's doing it. Okay, fine. I was just asking a general question, not particular to this. The point is that in this case it says ish twice. So there you go. Uh, even two people. Afilu ish ve'ish she'alu chayavim. Next halacha. Zorig miktzat matanot b'chutz chayav. Let's say just some of the blood is thrown outside the temple. He's still liable. What does that mean? Hamakabel dam chatat b'kos echad. He received the blood of the sin offering in one cup. So this guy's a kohen because only kohen receives the blood, and this is in the temple. Natan mimenu b'chutz. And then he applies some of it in an altar that's right outside the temple, in the chil, let's say. And the chazar natan bifnim, and then he puts some of that blood back where it's supposed to be, on the altar within the temple. Chayav ala nitan b'chutz. Okay, he is liable for that which he put on the altar outside the temple. Why? Sharei kulo ra'ui li karev bifnim. All of it was fit to have been brought on the proper temple, within the temple, or the proper altar within the temple. If he first put it on the altar inside the temple properly, he did the mitzvah, then he put more of it on the altar outside the temple, he's exempt for that sin. Why? What's the difference? The order matters. What? Because that's just leftovers already. Shirayim in this case means, oh, the mitzvah's been done, now there's just what's left. Okay, so you read this. So the Rambam says basically what matters here? Chronology, right?
Because if you take it out first, that blood, it's like taking
Right. I don't know if it's a completely analogous or the same halachic mechanism governs the two, but that's the space of halacha. Now get this. This is where the argument happens. Well, im kibel b'shtei kosoth. The coin receives blood in two different cups, which could be possible. How much does this sin offering? Sin offering, let's say, is a female. Okay.
Wait, no, that doesn't.
Sin offering, yeah, chatas is a female sheep.
Right.
Okay, it's okay. I've never offered a sin offering before, so I have no real experience. But they say that he tries to cover up the fact that it's a female because he's embarrassed that it's a sin, right? That's the classic Mamar Chazal about that. So this is a sheep. If you're looking closely, you can see it's a female, right? He catches the blood. The cups are small enough such that when the blood first comes out of anything that's still alive and the heart is beating, it comes out strong, right? There's quite a lot of blood that comes out. It's not a pretty thing, to be honest. But there's enough to fill two cups. Okay? After the blood spurts out, if the animal's already dead, so the blood just comes out naturally, I guess by not osmosis, but whatever normal diffusive process. So that doesn't come out with pressure. So that's called considered dam tamtzit. That's not dam nefesh that has to be caught for the sacrificial blood application. So he catches the blood in two cups. Bein shnatan shnei b'chutz. Okay, whether you put both of them on the outside altar, o echad b'chutz ve'echad b'fnim, or one within the temple, one outside, one within. O echad b'fnim ve'echad b'chutz. Harei zeh chayav. Okay. So they say the way Ram says echad b'chutz ve'echad b'fnim, or echad b'fnim ve'echad b'chutz. What's the difference between those two cases? He put one bifnim, one outside, one inside. Doesn't really matter. It means, you look over here, when it says echad b'chutz ve'echad b'fnim, echad means the first one was placed outside, and the second one was done inside. Or vice versa. The first one was applied in the temple, the second one was applied outside the temple. He's still liable. Two different cups. Or the cup that God's blood applied to the altar got applied first. The order doesn't matter. He's still obligated for this one. So, like I said, chronology doesn't seem to matter in this case. Two cups. Yeah.
And not just.
This one cup was done properly. Two cups. Okay. Like a catch in two hands. Well, the coin's supposed to catch everything in his right hand. Okay. So he has a teacup here, so he's able to hold two cups with one hand. Or he's like that guy that was it Thurman Munson or something? The catcher who could hold like many baseballs in one hand. Okay, whatever. He has a large enough hand that he could hold a number of cups in his hand. Okay, so the Kohen has two cups, and now one cup will be spilled on this altar, and one cup will be spilled out there. So the Rambam says it doesn't matter which order it was. one cup entirely inside, one cup entirely outside. We don't it's certain that the one outside was applied first. No, it's certain the one inside was applied first. The chronology doesn't matter. Which one came first doesn't matter. He's chayav for doing the outside one.
But saying that he first poured all the blood that is needed inside first, and then he goes outside.
Yeah. Or vice versa. He poured a whole cup outside, but then poured a cup inside. He's still liable for what he did outside.
Says that he pours some inside.
But the first instance was one cup.
Still, he poured it inside first. He went outside, poured it. He went back inside and poured it again.
Yeah.
Because he hadn't poured it down. In that case, it would be understandable because it's still a potential that could have been poured on the inside, poured on the outside. But once everything's poured on the inside, there was leftovers, and that's what he did.
So you're starting to think like the Ravid.
If he has two cups and he pours some from one cup, other side pours from the other cup, and go back inside and pour the other side.
We're not talking about once just a little bit of blood counts, by the way. We're talking about a chatos. How did he used to do a chatos? What's the main application? How much blood of the chatos is actually put on the altar properly? We saw this before. He dips in his finger and applies it with 3 fingers like this. Remember? That's very little. There's definitely going to be shirayim. There's always leftover blood. And then that's poured out, okay, somewhere. The point is, the way the Rambam has it, he has 2 cups of chatas blood. The fact that some of it was applied to the temple in the proper altar, and then he has another cup, and he applies it outside on the different altar, can't say, well, the mitzvah was already done, so this blood that he provided on the altar was just shirayim, it's leftover. It's not considered leftover. And lehefich, if he takes this blood, it means on the other way of thinking about this, if he takes 1 cup of blood and applies it to his outside altar, he's hit with an obligation, but he still has a cup of other blood that's perfectly valid from this sin offering that can be applied on the altar here. So that's good. I'm just saying that's the way the Rambam understands it. Like I said here, chronology doesn't matter. Unlike in the first case where, because we're dealing with 1 cup, depends on what was done first.
Is it possible or allowed for you to apply the other cup as well?
Well, if a person, let's say, had a chatas in the temple, and he saw the Kohen take that cup of blood and spill it on an outside altar, that's bad. That Kohen just did a sin. And this fellow who brought the sin offering, he has yet to achieve atonement for what he did because the blood has to be applied on the altar properly. So it's good if there's another cup of blood that another Kohen could technically apply to the proper altar. So that would be a good thing to have extra blood in a different kli, that is. That would be good for him, I don't know. But I do know that the Ravid disagrees here. Okay? What does the Ravid say? You guys don't have Ravid, so I'll read it to you. Okay? Hold on 1 second. Hazorik mitzad ad echad bifnim. So here's the Ravid's Dibur Maskil. Amar Avram, ze eino klum. Wow, we've seen throughout this, last few chapters, he really disagrees with the Rambam all over the place. Chai Roshi, right? He says about the Rambam's halacha here, eino klum. It's a gornished. You know what gornished is? It means a nothing in Yiddish. Okay? The echad bifnim ve'echad bachutz. If he were to take 2 cups, 2 cups of the sacrificial blood. One is put bifnim, that means the proper altar. Echad b'chutz, outside altar, without the temple. Bein leman damar oseh chaviro dachui. Bein leman damar oseh oto shirayim. Sheni lo chazi bifnim. Okay, whether he calls it dachui or shirayim, whichever halachic mechanism. Sheni lo chazi bifnim. If 1 cup of blood was applied outside the temple, then the second cup is not applicable. It means it cannot be applied within the temple. They ruin the sacrifice. So chronology does matter. If the blood is poured properly within the temple from the first cup, then he achieved the korban. And by the way, perhaps that was what is about this other cup. He pours it outside. Maybe he's tour. Okay, but he's certainly not the korban's ruined. Whereas if the first cup, we're not talking about validity of he says lo chazi bifnim. It's not even valid. Okay, if he poured the first cup outside the temple on that altar, not only has he done an avera, he's liable for it. That second cup now can no longer be applied to the actual altar in the temple. He blew it. The Kohen ruined it. The Rambam would disagree.
Yeah, side question. How is Cohen getting outside? What will that be his job to? I mean, they're guarding the Arabai, so are they supposed to stop him?
Well,
How is he getting outside?
he's just walking out the gate. No, maybe they're trying to stop him. Someone should stop him. Someone should warn him not to do it. You know? Korean here says, the Das arrived im Nathan Hadam Shebechos Rishona Bifnim, Vakachiza Meakosa Shnia Patur. And if he succeeded, he put the kos, the first cup, inside. He succeeded in offering the sacrifice, and then he takes that second cup and puts it outside. He should be exempt from punishment. Okay? So basically, Ravid says that in either case, you follow the first cup. First cup applied properly, so now the second cup doesn't count. Even if it's put outside bachutz, it definitely won't ruin the sacrifice. And the one, this kohen who's pouring it, I guess, or someone else who took that blood for the kohen, will not be hit with an obligation. And if the blood is applied outside, that blood is applied outside first in this cup, then the blood in the second cup is already, ruined. Okay? Sheni lo chazi bifnim. The other one is not good enough inside. Okay? So machlokas, big machlokas, Ravid and Rambam. I think that's the last one we have in this section. Okay, let's get to the end. Kometz and Levona of Mincha. What's the kometz? You're using 4 fingers or 3 fingers. Okay, machlokas. Okay, fine. And the frankincense is in there, about 2 olives worth of flour, and the frankincense, that part of the meal offering, is going to offer it outside the temple. The kometz is within the temple, and the levona outside, or vice versa. The levona was inside, the kometz is outside. Chayav. So he's to be hit with a penalty for doing this. There are 2 bowls, ceremonial bowls of levona, that's the frankincense, that are sitting on the table with the showbread all week long, right? So 12 new loaves plus 2 new bowls of frankincense. And what happens on Shabbos? The Kohanim eat the showbread, they give it out among the Kohanim, and the bowls of frankincense are burned on the altar. Okay. What happens? He took 1 bowl, instead of putting it on the altar like he's supposed to, he burned it outside. By the way, the fact that they built an altar so close to the base of Mikdash, right? Somewhere in Har HaBayis, let's say, and people are taking stuff out of the temple and actually burning it there, that's scandalous, right? But it's not unprecedented. Well, or it's not unprecedented. It's mentioned in the Bible that there were times in First Temple and Second Temple, by the way, where authorities, and I mean illegitimate authorities, sinners, constructed forbidden altars or misused the altar. Okay, they made altars to Avodah Zarah. So there might have been some pious people who thought, well, that means we're going back to the way things were, Heter Bamos time. Rabbi Klein, who we're going to mention again, points out that there was an opinion that once the first temple was destroyed, people thought we could go back to the Heter Bamos. Or if the temple's out of service, Heter Bamos. Right? That's just continuing. Well, Bali, if the temple was destroyed by and burnt to the ground by Babylonians, or just rendered completely empty by Hellenists. Functionally, no temple service is happening. So, maybe goes back to the way things were before the temple was constructed. So it's not so radical to believe this. So it's not crazy. And as a matter of fact, every time we talk about bringing Korban Pesach, God willing, what do we get? We always get people suggest, why can't you just build an altar, somewhere else in Yerushalayim? Why can't you do it in the Kotel Plaza or that area that they gave to the troublemakers to do their mixed prayer services near the Kotel? You know what happened with that mixed prayer area? They fought for it, and then they finally got it. So what they do?
I've been there. There's never
anything that because it wasn't about that. Same reason why. Wait a minute. The Hellenists got the regular Jews out of the temple, right? They took it over for themselves, right? But how long did they stick around there and keep, hold the temple for themselves? They don't care about the temple. They're not religious. It was just about taking away from the Orthodox Jews. But once they got it, they didn't care for it. Then they leave it. They offered a few pigs to Zeus, and that was it. Then they were gone. So yeah. So people used to build. I've always had this foolish idea that you could build an altar near the temple, and that would be a good replacement. So they say, just offer Korban Pesach, somewhere else. You do that to your Gul Korban Pesach, you might as well just make it the real thing. What's the difference? Jerusalem is God's chosen place. Or because of all this fighting over the Temple Mount, let's just move the temple somewhere else. Why can't we do that? The answer is you can't. See? So here we go. He says, so he offered it. Okay, one inside, one outside, whatever it may be, he is hit with a penalty. Next, I have a note here. Yeah, basically, this shows something. There are different sins in different eras. Okay, different, right? That's what we get from studying Jewish history. Certain sins were in vogue in certain times and places, right? And nowadays, I think that the sin is not necessarily idols. There's no avodah zarah that people are worshiping. Thank God, like in the olden days. But I think it's confusion and lack of intent is the problem. Confusion among religious Jews or those who are trying to be loyal to the Torah. They don't know enough Torah, and even what they do know, they don't know they can put into practice. And there's a lack of kavanah. They don't know how to channel what they want to do. That's what's plaguing us right now. That's why we don't have a temple. That's why, if we had a Navi today, it would say people have to go back to the basics. Read these types of halachas, know what you need to do. Okay? There's a lot of confusion and lack of intent. Okay. Here's an important halacha. This is why you can't do what we were suggesting. If a person were to slaughter sacrifices today, and it was outside the Azara, he built an altar. He says, well, maybe man can do it nowadays. No, you can't. You're chayav. Well, because they don't know the halacha. They don't know halacha. The halacha excludes this. And the Rambam explains why this is the halacha. Even nowadays, if we don't have a temple service and we don't have a temple, we don't have an altar, you can't just go build an altar somewhere else and offer sacrifice there. Why not? Because that which he wants to bring as a korban, let's say korban Pesach, is fit to be brought to the temple. Sharei mutar lakriv. It is permissible to bring sacrifice today. The temple's not standing. There's no altar, but you can still bring sacrifice. Afal pi shein bayith, even though there is no temple. Shekedusha rishonah kidusha l'shata v'kidusha l'ati lavo. The first sanctification of the temple, Solomon's time, counted for then and forever. Kemoshe bi'arno. As we explained before, we've reviewed this many times. So you can't just build something and all that, but you're still hit with the obligation. That means the temple's still standing, for better or for worse. There is an exception to this, though. Like the Rambam says elsewhere, you cannot offer sacrifice if the altar is in a state of disrepair. Kal v'chomer if it's not there. So what do you got to do? You have to build the altar and make sure it's complete, and then you could offer sacrifice. So let's see some notes over here. Well,
if you had pure kohanim, there's no reason you could offer korbanos other than Pesach.
Yeah, you could offer everything.
Okay.
I know. Crazy.
A friend of my Rav has a whole project trying to get paraduma. I think he was close before he got drafted. But
I'm surprised no one's done a paraduma, to be honest.
really hard to.
Okay, Christians can do whatever they want. We're about to read how it's permissible for them. What? Oh, well, Jewish group. We're about to read the halacha. What say you have a group comes from Chutz La'aretz of Noahites or Christians, whatever they may be, or even Muslims, and sacrifice to God. What's the halacha? To, let's say, the true God.
They can, but in the temple. And then, but if they try to bring something like a shlomo, you bring it as a olah instead.
Okay, so let's say they're working on their own. They're not involving us Jews.
Then they can bring olah or shlomo, right?
So let's read the halacha. Hashochet kodshei goyim b'chutz chayav. A Jew slaughters sacrificial animals of Gentiles outside the temple is liable. And so too the Jew who actually burns these sacrificial animals on some altar beyond the temple, also he is hit with a prohibition. The Goyim are allowed to bring burnt offerings to God anywhere. Understand that? No Jewish involvement. You have Noahides, they want to build an altar in South America or in Guam, as it may be, or in Australia. Go right ahead. As long as it's a burnt offering. Okay? Vihu she'akrivu b'vamashi yivnu. And it has to be on the Jew built. So Jew is not involved. So let Gentiles build even a whole temple to God. Okay, but the temple doesn't mean place of sacrifice necessarily. Noahides, how do they worship? They can build their own place of Noahide worship. There's nothing wrong with them building a building and saying this is a place of Noahide worship. They're just supposed to know no idols and the other rules that apply to them. So they put, let's say, outside their Noahide place of prayer, their Noahide convocation, whatever it is, I don't know. Do they have a word for a Noahide place of prayer yet? That'd be cool if they actually had a word, just like we have a word specifically for place of Jewish worship. So too, they build this, and they should have a bama. You should teach them how to build a bama. Don't build a matzeva, build a bama, right? Out of whole stones, etc., or out of earth. They should build it, and they should be taught how to do it, but don't help them. It is forbidden to actually assist them or to do it on their behalf. It has been prohibited upon us to offer sacrifice. We Jews are limited. Okay? And by the way, this is another example of, is it possible that something's prohibited mutter for Goyim, but prohibited for Jews? Sorry. And the answer is, of course, there's a lot of things that they can do that we can't. They have looser standards of what else?
Shitu.
Well, not Shituf. We saw that last week. The Rambam doesn't hold to that. That's the Tosfos' claim.
Right.
That's a very weak claim. They can eat all sorts of animals. Pig is not forbidden to Goyim. Aver Menachai is forbidden to Goyim. Seafood is not forbidden to Goyim. It's forbidden to us, right? They don't have to check the grasshopper to see if it's one of the kosher locusts or not. They just can eat it. Whereas, well, no. Then technically speaking, yes. No, because before Chazal's time there was no issue of Shabbos. Chazal made the decree against Shabbos for them. And by the way, it doesn't really count. That's a like a later one where it says they shouldn't learn Torah and they shouldn't keep Shabbos is a later first century Gzera against the Christians because they adopted a new form of Shabbos and a new form of Torah. But before that, there was no concept. Okay. Umutar lo wrote lahem, and we could also instruct them. It's permissible to instruct them. There are examples of Bai and Rava doing this for Babylonians who want to know how to offer sacrifice. We should teach them how to offer sacrifice to God, the God. Blessed is He. Now, that's pretty interesting. Rabbi Reuven Chaim Klein, the prolific Rabbi Reuven Chaim Klein, we discussed his article about the Heter Bamos and the temples that existed in Heliopolis, the Temple of Onias, and the temple at Elephant Island in the Nile on the south side. I'd just like to add at this point, he also points out that if you hold of the idea that the Jews, Chas v'Shalom, were offering sacrifice in Elephantine, which maybe they definitely were offering sacrifice at the Temple of Onias, says one other possibility is that it was merely a place to teach Gentiles how to offer sacrifice. Gentiles were the one doing the sacrificing. It was a Jewish place, but that's where they taught the Gentiles what to do.
Well, but the Gemara says about the temple in Heliopolis that it was just usser, right? Yeah, straight up, it was in Avera because Jews were doing it.
So then, how could, if it's an Avera because Jews are doing it, why are we saying that it was actually mutter and Gentiles were doing it?
Because when Gentiles do it, it's mutter.
Yeah, yes, but that wasn't the case
in the Temple of Onias in Heliopolis. I'm talking about Elephantine. Okay, in Elephantine, which is Chazal don't talk about that much. Why Chazal? But Chazal used it as a generality. Chazal, when they talk about Kohanim, remember Kohanim who served somewhere else, so they say Jewish Kohanim who served Avodah Zarah, they've disqualified themselves. That's the din d'oraisa. A Jewish Kohen who served at the temple of Onias in Heliopolis, that's it's still Chazal told him not to serve, but it's not like he served the Avodah Zarah. That's serving God, but just in the wrong place. Okay, that was basically a bummer. The Rambam doesn't mention the temple of Onias explicitly. Chazal, who are familiar with that temple because that was around in late Second Temple times, described that one. But in Achinami, in the times of the First Temple, instead of the temple of Onias, what did they have in Eretz Yisrael? They had the base Bamos of Yeravam, which was halachically the same thing. Okay, a place of worship of the one true God, but in the wrong way. And it was considered a bama, shchitas chutz, and all that. Okay, so we need to make that point. The fact that the Rambam is invoking, by the way, what he mentioned at the end of Hilchos Beis Bechira, right? You can still offer sacrifice. The temple is still technically a temple, even though you don't see a temple standing there. All the halachas still apply. Okay, so what I mean by for better or for worse, I mean you still offer sacrifice there, and if you offer your sacrifice somewhere else, it's just as usher. That was the for better or for worse thing. Let's see here. It's a good question. Let's see here. So the Rambam says that he just invoked over here that the Goyim have certain rules about sacrifice, right? So where are those rules, Rambam? Sure, there's a lot more to teach us about this, right?
I don't think it's.
Why don't you bring it? And Gemara gives an example that Abai and Rava showed those Babylonians that the young men who were acting as literal altar boys should be of similar height and dressed similarly. To have them both wear the same white tunic or whatever it is. Why? That's Hiddur Mitzvah. Goyim have a concept of Hiddur Mitzvah? Yes. They should bring, nice fat bulls if they want to, if they want the best thing. Okay, so it's a good question why the Rambam didn't mention here. Just like, even though the last two chapters disallow bamos, right? We've talked about how bamos are bad, but there are a lot of halachas in Mishnaic literature, and the Gemara is about what were the halachas when bamos were around. The only time the Rambam mentioned bamos la halacha, technically speaking, when it was mutter, is at the beginning of Korban Pesach, like we saw 2 years ago. The Rambam says even Korban Pesach shouldn't be on a bama, it's a special commandment. You would have had a havamina, bring your Korban Pesach on a bama, that's okay. Even b'shas bamos you can't. What's the havamina? Korban Pesach turns every person to a kohen, turns every house into a Beis Hamikdash. So you think you offer Korban Pesach everywhere? Kamash Malan, you shouldn't. Okay, it's a good question why the Rambam doesn't mention this. So I'd like to read a note here to be as a stepping stone to what we have to see. He says here, the Ritva and the Sefer Chinuch write like the Rambam. What? That all the halachas still apply today. However, the consequence of what the Ravid said was that the temple lost its sanctity. The temple was destroyed, no more sanctity there. What does that mean? That there's, technically speaking, no prohibition of entry to the temple precincts. Make sense? There are people who hold this way, by the way. There's one fellow who goes to Har Bayis. There's Hasidic groups say that they bring proofs to the Ravid's position that the Ravid's position was followed. So technically speaking, until we rebuild the temple, it's free. Jews are free to walk there. There's no prohibitions around. You're not going to get hit with curries. Isn't that wild? Yeah. Okay, but a consequence of this Ravid also, the Ravid he's talking about is in Hilchos Beis Bechira, when the Rambam first lays out his whole theory as to why the temple is still sanctified. That's where the Ravid disagrees. He says here, Kedushas habayis ba'azara batlu b'churban, v'lachein ha'shochedo amale b'chutz, la'mikdash b'zman hazeh pater. All these halachas that the Rambam described, when he's chayav, when he's pater for doing a korban outside the temple, he's now always pater, because the temple's not standing, according to the Ravid. When the Ravid disagrees with the Rambam, Chayav, Pater, whatever it is, that's assuming the temple's standing.
Wait,
let's go on.
Well, the Ravid uses the term Pater.
Yeah, that's the consequence. Pater for everything, no matter all the cases that we saw over here.
Wait, I thought he held that it was mutter to go even to Kodesh HaKadosh.
We're talking about offering sacrifice beyond the temple. According to the Ravid,
case, we have a bias to like the Heichel. If you're not a Kohen, he says it's mutter, not just pater.
Yeah, technically speaking, there's no prohibitions.
So mutter.
Yeah.
Fine.
I don't think he says it explicitly. Let's. It's good to review the Ravid. Go to. Well, you want to be medaitis. Amar Avram Svaras Atzmo. It's in Hilchos Beis Bechira, the 6th parak. The 14th halacha. Amar Avram Svaras Atzmo Hizo V'lo Yadati Ma'ilo. I don't know where the Rambam got all this. Svaras Atzmo. Rambam's making things up. Uv'chama Mekomos B'Mishnah Im Ein Mikdash Yirkav. It talks about Meiser Sheni. By the way, we have a YouTube video about this. We went into depth. Answer to the Ravid. Okay, how you read Rambam's Mishnayos and other sources, you see that there's actually good answers to this. Okay, and it says if he has Meiser Sheni, just let it rot because you can't do it. And it talks about Nafal Mechitzos, Alma Lamanda Amar Kedusha Rishona Lo Kitchelasi Lavo Lo Chalak Bein Mikdash Yerushalayim Yishar Eretz Yisrael. Just like Eretz Yisrael lost its Kedusha with the destruction of the temple the first time around, so too Kedusha Sabai is also gone. Rabbi Yossi says that the sanctity of the land, the second time around, second Commonwealth, lasted forever, even until today. That's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Rabbi Yossi is talking about all of Eretz Yisrael, but not Jerusalem and the Mikdash. Are you familiar with this? You're looking like you probably had like 5 classes on this.
I mean,
Yeah, they taught you this in school.
well, we're doing Zvachim.
Good. So how far in Zvachim? Are you in the last chapter?
No, we're still in the first.
Okay, we're about to see a lot from the last chapter of Zvachim. Okay. Lefi Shaya Yodea Ezra Shamikdash Rishlaim Asidim Lishtanos was Kadesh Kiddush Achar Olami Kiddush Achar Olami. Ezra knew eventually there's going to be a third Kiddush, an eventual one that's going to last forever. Bechvod Hashem Olam Kach Nigleli Misod Hashem Lirav Leficha Chanichnas Atasham Ein Bo Karis. That sounds like B'diavad. Nichnas Atasham Ein Bo Karis. But the whole idea is, why is there Ein Bo Karis? Because the Kedusha levels don't exist. And if it's all just Kedushas Eretz Yisrael and there's no Kedushas Mikdash or Yerushalayim even, so what's preventing you from going in there? Remember, Kedusha, Rambam defines, Kedusha means prohibited entry. No Kedusha, no prohibited entry.
Yeah.
So there's no Karis. So, okay, ambiguous. How about we'll leave it at there? We don't know. L'chachila, can you go there? I don't know. Either way, certainly the places where it's mutter to go. The Rambam says there are places you can go in Har-Bayis today, right?
Yeah.
So according to the Ravid, Kal V'chomer, you can go to those places.
Yeah.
Maybe even go farther. So there's a pamphlet you could read it. It's actually quite interesting. Brings only kosher sources, by the way. The other approach. Okay, this is a major schismatic halachic thing here between the Ravid and the Rambam. So those who've been following in the Ravid, they have a lot to rely on. Well, the Ravid says, "So Hashem Lireav." We understand where the Rambam got it. He says the Rambam made up, but we understand what the Rambam's saying. And the Ravid says, I can't prove it to you. I just know that God helps out those who know a lot of Torah. He gives us insights into the Torah. That's what he says. Okay. Let's continue at the end of this. According to the Tosafos, even though we say that perhaps the sanctity of the first temple persisted forever, because there is no altar, the sacrifice cannot be offered, technically speaking. No altar, no sacrifice. Therefore, anything done b'chutz, outside the temple, you're still pater. You're still exempt. All the halachas that we've discussed in the last 2 chapters of when a person might be hit with the penalty for offering sacrifice beyond the temple, that was talking about when the mizbeach is standing. Well, there's Kedusha. There's Kedusha on Har-Bayis. You're supposed to have a temple. You're supposed to build a Mizbeach. But before you build a Mizbeach, no sacrifice is valid. Therefore, because there's no valid sacrifice inside the temple, anything done outside the temple will not be hit with the penalty. Tosfos equate the two. If you don't have a valid altar in which to offer sacrifice, then you can't punish people for offering sacrifice beyond the temple, even though they shouldn't. Can't punish them. So, blanket patur. The Ravid would give a blanket patur because temple's been destroyed, no more kedusha, and the Tosfos would give a blanket patur. All the last 2 chapters. What's that like? It's like when you study Hilchos Nidin in the Rambam. The Rambam says everything I discussed was in the olden days. Now there's new halachas. Now we're much more machmir. Well, because it says explicitly in the Torah, don't bring your sacrifice beyond the temple. You're patur because it's not. There's no, for whatever reason, they say there's halachic mechanism. It is forbidden. A forbidden is forbidden, but doesn't mean to punish people for it. We have a lot of times pater aval aser, no punishment, but still forbidden before the fact. That's a general principle. There's a lot of things. There's usually it's what we call the threshold. Times where a Jewish person would be considered pater from whatever penalty because maybe it's not witnessed, he wasn't warned, it's not the proper shiur, he didn't have the right das, right? There's a lot of mitigating circumstances that we don't punish people for things. That's all. Forbidden, not punishable. Okay, so now I'm going to ask a question. The Rambam respond that the Mizbeach can be repaired in a day to the Tosfos, by the way. Tosfos says, we might agree with the Rambam. The temple sanctity persists until today, and it always has been. Once it was dedicated, there's no more heter bamos. There's a temple. They go hand in hand. When the temple was dedicated initially, heter bamos is gone. There's always a prohibition of offering sacrifice beyond the temple. But Tosfos says, but there's no Mizbeach, so no sacrifice could be offered anyways. And the Rambam would answer, so build a Mizbeach. You could build a Mizbeach in a day. As a matter of fact, there are people, they claim that they already have a portable Mizbeach. It's already built, you just have to put it there. Right? So, yeah, it's an instant thing.
I mean, the question is where,
well,
right?
There's only one place to put the Mizbeach.
Yeah, but
it's a huge place, and you can't miss it.
I mean, as far as I understand, there's a machlokas. Does the Mizbeach have to take up the entire size of the original Mizbeach, or could you make a small
the
one?
Rambam holds, where they basically hold the Rambam says it has to, ideally, it should be exact shiur. Fit the 32 by 32 box.
Yeah.
However, most says that doesn't have to be. You could build it even as small as the altar in the tabernacle, which was a lot smaller. Right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember precisely.
I think it was 3 by 3 or something like that. Well, it was 5 by 5.
What I probably wrong.
I always forget this. Here, look. It says make the Mizbeach. What was the dimensions? By the way, and we saw that the Mizbeach says what? It's only 3 amos tall, right? Chamesh amos orech, chamesh amos rochav. Yeah, 5 by 5. Okay, like you said. Okay, good. Didn't forget it. So he says that's the minimum. Now they build much more than 5 by 5, but whatever. Once you have a Mizbeach that's only a certain size, and you have to fit it into this box that's 32 by 32, and there's machlokas in very few, by the way. That now that we have much more, but there's an area that's the locus of all the good deos that definitely the Mizbeach they're trying to bring can fit.
Sure, if you hold by the Rambam, but as far as I understand, there are other Rishonim that have to like the 32 by 32.
Okay.
In which case you need to...
Yeah, but we have nothing better. We have no one better on whom to rely than the Rambam.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember asking Rabbi Rabinovich about that. When it came to time, he says, follow the Rambam. There's a reason he's the Rambam. Like we said a few weeks ago, Ravid might have been a bigger genius than the Rambam. And he might have known halacha better. But even so, the Ravid is responding to Rambam's code. He's a nosei kli of nosei kalim of who? Of the Rambam. It's like you could disagree with the Shulchan Aruch, but Lamaisa, then you're just writing a parish on the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is still, Rosh Hashanah. He's still the Rosh Hashiva. Okay. So now let's ask some questions. Can Goyim use other animals besides the 5 animals listed as sacrifice? That's the first question we should be asking. We know that Noach took 7 male and 7 female of the clean animals, so-called clean animals in Noach's time. Yeah, 14 animals. We know that for consumption, there are many clean animals, both chaya and behema. Chaya means wild animal. Behema means domesticated, right? There are many different types, as long as they're ruminants and they have split hooves. So that could be thousands of species maybe. But the Torah demands of us that only 5 species of animal be brought as sacrifice. 3 types of mammals, domesticated animals, no chayos. Where are the 3 animals? 3 domesticated animals?
Cows, sheep, and
goats. Cows, sheep, and goats. And don't forget, there's many kosher birds. Are we supposed to bring any kosher shrutzim or any kosher fish?
No.
No. Okay. So those are totally disqualified. There's many kosher ones. And what about kosher birds? Yeah, only 2 species of birds out of all the kosher ones. By the way, what's the most common thing that people eat? Study your Bava Kama. read the first few chapters, but Makam, like we told people, Jews have what? Chickens. Jews eat chicken. As a matter of fact, Chazal chose the chicken's egg as the basis for many of the shiurim they're discussing. Okay, in Hilchot Shabbos, the chicken egg is used for measurements. Is what? The chicken egg. Why the chicken egg? Because Jews eat chicken. Okay, Jews have chickens forever. So, ironically, that's not the one chosen for the temple service. Which ones they chose? Turtles and pigeon doves. So Goyim, if Goyim want to slaughter a chicken for sacrifice because they see that that's what the Jews eat all the time. Matter of fact, Jews eat chicken every Shabbos, right? Chicken. Who doesn't eat chicken soup or some form of chicken on Shabbos, right? So you can be. Is it proper? What about pigs? It's implied that Goyim can't offer things that are non-kosher even Noach's time. There was this concept of kosher. Perhaps Bema Torah then meant what would be called the kosher animals. So actually, these are discussed in the Gemara. Also, we read the beginning of Hilchos Ishut. That's talking about marriage, right? So the Rambam gives you a little bit of a history of marriage there. That once upon a time, marriage was just a decision made between two consenting adults, right? Okay. She agrees to be his wife. They go home. They're married. There's no religious ceremony. And according to the Rambam, they shouldn't create religious ceremonies. There's no legal ceremony. You don't have to go to, let's say, a justice of the peace or get a marriage license from the secular authorities. They're married until they decide to call it off, right? As long as she's in his house. And the Rambam says that's basically what governed even what we would call Hebrew marriage until the Torah was given. And the Jews were given a higher standard. The Jews were told that they have to effectuate the marriage through kiddushin and witnesses. And the Chazal added a few layers of that, Sheva Brachas and the Kesuba and everything like that. And to dissolve the marriage, there has to be a writ of divorce from the man, right? But the Rambam is basically telling you what used to be for Jews also, the pre-Sinai days, Rotzahu, Rotzahi. And the Rambam is basically describing the halacha as it exists until today for Gentiles. That is, B'nai Noach, they want to know what is a marriage. L'may nafkamina, there is a prohibition of adultery for B'nai Noach, right? So they should know, how do I know that woman is taken and not available? So you have to know these things. So the Rambam is basically telling you the halacha that exists, which applied before Matan Torah to everybody, still applies today for B'nai Noach. So if we want to know what halachas apply today for Gentiles offering sacrifice, we need to look into what the Torah tells us regarding what the Jews did before Matan Torah. Does such a thing exist? Are there sources about this? And the answer is yes. It's Zvachim. It's alluded to in the Mishneh, and it's mostly in the Tosefta. The Tosefta Zvachim brings that which existed before Matan Torah, and then that which existed before the Mishkan was set up. Because the sages tell us that the creation of the Mishkan changed a lot that even governed Jews. When was the Mishkan created or officially put into service? On the first day of Nisan, a year after the Exodus or so. Well, really, 2 weeks shy of a year after the Exodus. And the Torah was given how long after the Exodus? 49 days, right? 49 days after Exodus, we have revelation at Sinai, and then a few months later, the erection of the Mishkan. So that means that there was a period before the building of the Mishkan where the halacha was unique for the Jewish people because the Torah has been given. By the way, there's a medrash about that. The Jewish people had a hard time accepting the new laws of marriage and arayos that was just given to them by Moshe Rabbeinu, right? They're crying about it. Much harder. Moshe Rabbeinu has come down from Sinai. We knew we were going to get laws. But now it's a little bit, some things they can't accept. By the way, was the other thing they couldn't accept? There's a few things that were rejected, sort of, that took us a few weeks to accept. The concept of Kohanim, right? That was challenged. The concept of Nivuas Moshe Rabbeinu, that was challenged by Adas Korach. The concept of going to the land of Israel, engaging in war, chasing out the enemy and settling it. As a matter of fact, I looked around today, we still have a little difficulty with that concept, right? Yeah, Avodah Zarah, yeah, but no, Avodah Zarah was always forbidden, though. It was forbidden since Adam Rishon. So, okay, so let's get into this. that which applied to Gentiles before Sinai still applies to Gentiles today. I'll read this over here. All the laws of Gentile sacrifice can therefore be found in Tosefta Zvachim, Yud Gimel. So where do you get yourself a good copy of Tosefta? They have them online now with Machon Mamre. We have the Lieberman edition here, and this is something that a lot of the Rum Gemaras have Tosefta in the back, right? But the Steinsaltz went more than that. He has a good edition, a critical edition in the back of every Masechta in this copy over here. Okay, so he also has little footnotes that are easy to read. So if you want to study Tosefta, I think that you make a seam on the Gemara, open up the Tosefta also, go through it. One of the things that's surprising, Tosefta is all brises, right? It means outtakes from the Mishnah. There's a lot of brises that are brought in Gemara somewhere. It's like, where is this? It's not Tosefta. It's just a brisa that occurs in the Gemara. And sometimes you have Rishonim who mention there's a brisa, and then we look through all of our sources. I'm not good enough to do it, but people do this. They say it must have been Rashi was aware of a brisa that we don't have, or Rambam or Ramban had a brisa that we don't have. Right? You've heard such a thing? Those come up every now and then. Okay, so let's read some Tosefta. And this Tosefta is actually analyzed in that last chapter of the Bavli there in Zvachim. They bring up brises from there and they discuss it. So that's good. So I'll read you this Tosefta, and we could see what actually then and what still applies to Goyim. Ad shalohu kam mishkan hayu habamoth mutaroth. Okay, until the Mishkan was erected, the bamoth were permissible. Okay. By the way, heter bamos existed at different times of Jewish history, so you could imagine that Chazal say they finished actually all the work for the Mishkan by Hanukkah time. So let's say it was Adar in the desert. So if you were someone, you could have built your own altar right outside the camp, and you had a sheep, you could have offered as sacrifice to God, just like you could have done before Solomon built the temple. Ma hein makrivin. What were the sacrifices? Because they didn't have the laws like in Vayikra where it says you need to limit it to 3 types of animals and 2 types of birds. All right. So what they offer as sacrifice? Behema chaya va'of. Behema chaya va'of. They could offer a deer, right? A giraffe. I don't know what's a kosher behema that's not sacrificial. Well, buffalo is a behema. I think it might be a chaya. It might be the koi they're talking about or something. A domesticated kosher animal. It's not sheep or goat or bovine. Are there any left? There used to be more. What? Okay, you think about it. Okay, that's not a wild one. And also they could have offered chickens. Nowadays, people think chicken is too much associated with like voodoo or some avodah zarah type of thing. But there were Jews who could technically offer chickens. Okay,
Right, he posits.
I'm reading the Tosefta here. This is Tosefta Zvachim.
Sorry, I apologize.
You know what? I should put it on the screen for everybody because it's not on the screen. Here, hold still. In the Makoros Tosefta. Correct me if I'm wrong because I was copying this over here. Ad shelo mukam mishkan hayobon mutaroth by makrivin behema chayvov gedolim uktanim. See, adult or young. We saw that the halacha says that for all sorts of behemoths and ophos, the age matters. Bnei Yonah have to be before that stage of the tzihuv of the feathers, and Torim have to be after tzihuv, right? But here it says gedolim uktanim. Okay, chaya and oaf. It doesn't matter how big your chicken is or how small. It doesn't matter if your lamb is in its first year or its second year, whatever it is. There was no age definitions. Zecharim unikevos, male and female. We saw it with a lot of different korbanos for ages, and also is it a male or a female, right? Certain burnt offerings, by the way, nowadays in temple, since the temple was built, burnt off be entirely male, right? And when you have a shlamim, it could be male or female. And the Korban Pesach has to be a male. Tamimim uvali munim. What? Tamimim uvali mumim? You bring a bal mum? What do they mean bali mumim over here? It means lower standard. Just like they said, what's a bal mum according to Jewish law? We had a whole halacha here. Psulei hamukdashin. Isurim mizbeach. Brought to temple disqualified. Are things you can't bring to the temple of Chachil. Different mumim that are common for people and moving that are specific to animals. When it says that b'nei chaser evar, okay, that means tahorin aval lo tamein. What does tahorin aval lo tamein mean?
Yeah, but not. Yeah.
Is an animal of Torah a living sheep? Can it become tame
No.
with tumas mace, tumas carry, tumas aguf, tumas sheretz, tumas taras? Can a sheep be contaminated with any tumor whatsoever? Well, I could be contaminated, right?
No.
Bali Chaim are not nitmayim. They can't be mikabel. Bali Chaim cannot become tummy. The only way that is you kill the animal through not shchita, shoot it, doesn't come from a Jewish slaughterhouse, is a tumas nevela. Or it's slaughtered properly, but ends up not being kosher. It's a treif on the inside, but it's not tummy. But now it's a michael. Now it's food, so it can get the contamination that food can get contaminated with, right? But while the animal's alive, it can't get tummy. So in this case, when it says tahorin aval lo tamein, it means kosher species of animal, but not non-kosher species of animal, which means well, animals don't have tzaras. No, it only applies. Not only that, even humans don't use who have been pronounced to have tzaras. That is, the Kohen, because Yontif is coming up, will give the guy. Yeah, that's what he used to do. He used to give people a break, leeway. Okay, so this basically excludes what? Pigs, for example. Goyim couldn't offer pig even to God, right? Well, I mean, it's the different standards, right? No, they have to pick what we know as a so-called kosher animal, a kosher species. Yeah, but the guy is going to be slaughtering it. If a guy, let's say, were to pick a deer, right, kosher, but the guy is the one who's slaughtering it in his, mizbeach out there in Canada. In what way is that the animal kosher? Shchita by goy is non-kosher. The answer is talking here about the species, a kosher species. Hakol karev olah ut una hefshet v'nituach. Everything is brought as a burnt offering. No the other types of, no shlom. And it requires hefshet v'nituach. What's hefshet v'nituach? The animal should be skinned. When they burn a burnt offering to God, they shouldn't cut the animal into pieces, leave the skin on. They should skin the animal and then cut it into pieces. That's nituach. Nituach means, by the way, we do nituach in the base of Mikdash, even though we saw that's machlokas rishonim, depending on certain sacrifices. The head in one vessel and the foreleg and the hind leg and the side, right? That's how they should do it. What do you have? The last line in the first Tosefta. I had it differently. Okay. In the edition I was copied from, it says Hakuthim. Okay, the Samaritans.
Oh yeah, it's Hakutim here as well.
Hakutim. And what do you have in your edition? At the end of the first Tosefta Yud Gimel Aleph, Ovdei Kochavim is obviously, like Bar-Hayim points out, that's the censored version. No Kisvei Yad of Ovdei Kochavim. That's something that the Christian censors introduced when it says Goyim. So too with Kutim. Kutim are the Samaritans. Samaritans, why? Because they're Goyim. It used to say Goyim, so it got censored. Some say Ovdei Kochavim, some say Samaritans. Okay, but the point is, Goyim can do this today. See?
Wait, why would this be offensive to a Christian censor?
Because a lot of things are offensive to the Christian censors. Because they think the Jews are talking about them, saying like they're still. Because if you take all these classic texts, Talmudic texts, and Rambam, for example, and he talks about Goyim, and the Rambam's assumption is that Goyim are idolaters. That's offensive to Christians. They're trying to consider themselves non-idolaters, right? So they changed it. Okay? They don't want to be lumped with idolaters. Problem is, what does Rambam do? He lumps Christians with idolaters. Okay. That's the next step. Obviously, what's going on here? The first step started with Ad Shelo Hukama Mishkan, and the next one begins with also Ad Shelo Hukama Mishkan Hayu B'mot Mutarot. The same words, right? The two Toseftas are almost the same. What's the difference over here? So you look into in Zvachim, Kuf Tesvav on the Beis, you start to realize that something funny is going on here. The fact that this brisa opens with the same statement indicates it's governing a different group. This is now talking about Jews. Okay. The first Tosefta was talking about Gentiles, right? And that's Goyim still today. That's how it concludes. This is still the rules that apply to Goyim. The next Tosefta is talking about what about Jews? Mishkan, so about since Sinai and until the Mishkan was set up on the 1st of Nisan, which is how much time basically? 10 months or so, right? There were people to make Bamoth, and the firstborn. The Kohanim were firstborn. Is there such a concept in the previous Tosefta? No, because it's talking about Goyim. Goyim don't have a concept of priesthood, let alone firstborns. That is, anybody. Torah, specific commandment, that the sacrifice is done by whom? Firstborn men. And that's what says happened at Har Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu appointed Kohanim. Who are the Kohanim? The firstborn. Right? They had a lot of Kohanim. How many Kohanim did they have? How many firstborn Jews qualified for the priesthood at the giving of the Torah until the Mishkan was set up? It's actually in Bamidbar, about 22,000. It almost was equal to the number of Levites, aged 1 month and up. Remember? The Levites replaced the firstborn. Why did Levites get to replace the firstborn? What did they do? They were entirely not involved in Cheder Egel, like the other tribes. Well, I don't think Nachshon ben Aminadav could have been standing here saying, I'm a firstborn, and I'm from Shevet Yehuda. I had nothing to do with this Egel thing. Involved, that's bad enough. Levi, no one was involved, period. So Shevet, and also they're the ones who punished the sin.
Except for one.
Except for one. Even Aaron wasn't involved, was involved. You understand, Levi was not involved at all. Levites got promoted. They were a whole switcheroo thing going on. Every Levi is in place of first. Well, it's three parts. Midbar, Nussel, and Balos, right? You know what we're talking about? Are you a firstborn? Yeah, so really, I don't see that. It says that God made an eternal covenant with Levi and with Aaron that they're going to be forever, And there's a whole nevuah about this, that the Bnei Tzadok especially will get special privileges in the third temple. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. I guess it's a machlokas. Okay. So the service used to be conducted among the Jewish people. This, like I said, this second Tosefta halacha applies to Jews who do it. Moshe Rabbeinu showed Aaron what to do when they're setting up the Mishkan. It says Moshe Rabbeinu did everything. Right? Was Moshe Rabbeinu the firstborn? Absolutely not. Was he a Kohen? No. So how did he do it? Horasha. God told him, Moshe, you have to do this, and then then from then on, Aaron's the Kohen Gadol, right? Fine. Mishukam Mishkan Hayuva Bamot Asurot. Once the Mishkan was set up, now you can't make a bama anymore outside the tent, outside the Jewish camp, or within the Jewish camp, wherever it is, outside the Mishkan. And the only people who could do the actual service are Kohanim. What's a Kohen? Male descendant of Aaron. Okay, so let's talk about this. So there's Bnei Noach, that's the first group, and there's Bnei Yisrael, the second group, and other Tanaim disagreed. Okay, we read the Mishnah. Now we read the Gemara. We open up your Gemara's Zvachim. I'll bring you some machlokas in here. Some say that once the Torah was given, the Kohanim replaced the firstborn. They say that the Kohanim were introduced right at Matan Torah. Okay, that's not the majority opinion. The majority opinion is reflecting Tosefta that for a while, before Moshe Rabbeinu came down and told the people Aaron's going to be the new Kohen, and his family is going to be it. Other disputes, Torah mean kosher species are not used in sin. Some say, not like we introduced before, tameim not Torah not tameim. So he said it means kosher species, right? Some say no, as long as the animal wasn't used for some sort of avera. What avera were people using animals for? Bestiality. Yeah. Okay. And that's an unfortunate thing. There are some really crazy people who do that. Even today. Next, some sages brought scriptural proof that Shlomim were and therefore are brought by Bnei Noach. There are those who derive from Sukkim that Bnei Noach did Shlomim. And if Bnei Noach did Shlomim, that was before the Mishkan. Here we said that they always brought burnt offerings, and that's what they could still bring. The halacha says they could still bring olos, but some say no. Bnei Noach had this concept of shlamim. Okay, interesting. That's a historical machlokas, I guess, because it's no longer Egypt. Right. So he was the one who paskined for everybody, and the Radbaz has a parish on the Rambam. Some editions don't have the Radbaz, but the Radbaz is actually quite good. It has a lot more shakal v'tara than, let's say, the Kesef Mishneh. Radbaz, newer as a lot of Radbaz and newer ones also. Okay, good to read Radbaz. So he says that in the year 1256, Rabbeinu Hananel of Paris. By the way, this is not the Rabbeinu Hananel. Rabbeinu Hananel precedes Rashi. Rabbeinu Hananel, the Gemara is one of the Gonim. We're talking about Rabbeinu Hananel of Paris. Okay, well, so at the time, the fact that this is Crusader times. The Crusades lasted for quite a while. There was a lot of upheaval. Who was in charge of Har-Bayis in any given year, or having any given the Christians, right? So Mashma, he relied on the Rambam's rulings, like the Rabbaz himself did. Else, Rambam and Ravid, regarding the Temple Mount Sanctity, he returned back to see that, with Kedusha Lasilav, Kedusha Lashaita. The Rabbaz testifies that the Halach Lamaisa, the practice on the ground, was to hold like whom? The Rambam. The Ma'inaf Kamina, people used to dunk in the mikvah, and they used to go to the places that are permissible to go to, like we do today. And by the way, who else held like the Rambam? Lamaisa and did like the Rambam? The Rambam. Okay, according to the Rambam's letter and his son's letter, the Rambam and the two Dayanim and his son all went together to Har-Bayis, according to the Rambam's halachas. Okay, so this is like they say, Afra lefu maihu, means dust in their mouths. What's dust in their mouths? So it's a Mishneh, a Talmudic expression. Afra lefume or Afra lefu maihu, dust in their mouths, means this is a rebuke to those who want to. Let's see here. They would declare in the name of the Rambam that sacrifice ought not to happen until the Bias Mashiach. Okay? The Rambam says very clearly, the halach is applied today. We could makriven today. We just read this now. There are those who open up the last Rambam in the Mishneh Torah and say that in Messianic times, that's when the Korbanos are going to come back. What do they derive from that? Therefore, you're not supposed to offer Korbanos until Mashiach shows up and build the Beis HaMikdash. So this is obviously all these sources that we've seen until now in the testimony of the Radbaz show that that is not the case. Rabbeinu Hananel of Paris and the Radbaz, and like the Rambam types, they didn't say we have to wait for Mashiach before we could have a Havamina to offer sacrifice. Why did this come up? Because recently prominent Rabbanim have reaffirmed this position, namely that we are not even to attempt, perhaps even discuss. The chief rabbi said not even discuss these issues until the Mashiach comes and actually builds a temple. The only question is, how is the Mashiach supposed to do it if you're not going to let him? The only way you know he's Mashiach is if he succeeds, but you're not going to let him do it unless he's Mashiach. So they're a little bit stuck. It's a negative feedback. Either way, the point is, and this is a good conclusion, the that the Rambam definitely held what the Rambam held, and people held like the Rambam that you can go to the Temple Mount today, you could offer sacrifice today. Perhaps it's even the first step. The Vilna Gaon felt what? We'll close the words of the Vilna Gaon that the Geula will be when the Jewish people decide to do the Korban Tavid. The morning we wake up and say, we as the Jewish people are doing the Korban Tavid, that will be the redemption. Okay? Aschalta de Geula, or Ketzah Geula, whichever one it is, that is the Geula. So we're very close to it. It could happen tomorrow morning even. We're this close. There's no real stopping. As long as we hold like the Rambam, we'll need a Kohen Gadol, we'll need a Mizbeach, but it's not so difficult. And like Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan wrote, says, if any question comes up, so whoever's there, the Sanhedrin that's there, whatever they decide, that's the halacha. There's no real machlokas. Okay, so that concludes my HaKorbanos. We're going to start a little bit Korban Pesach because we have time. Everybody getting ready for Korban Pesach? What does it involve? Anybody here in Mechusar Kippurim? We're going to have a shir for the women this coming Shabbos. Practical preparations for Korban Pesach. For most men who are not converts to Judaism and who have never been a Mitzorah or Zav, you're probably not the Mechusar Kapara. Mechusar Kapara means you have to go through a special purification process and then bring a preliminary sacrifice before you can eat of other sacrifices. So Korban Pesach, the mitzvah is to eat, and you can't do that unless you bring your sacrifice. So if you're going to want to eat Korban Pesach, make sure you do your job. Every ger is like a Mechusar Kapara, not exactly, but he's in the state that he can only eat the Korban if he's already offered his Korban Gerus, so to speak. So too, women. We might assume la halacha that every woman, when she had her period, is like a zava, so she has to keep a shev and a kiyum. That's a chumrah. We don't say la korban each time just to purify, right? She's also mechusar kapara. However, every woman who has been pregnant, at least let's say for the minimum time, and she chas v'shalom had a miscarriage or a birth, then she is what's called a yoledeth. And a yoledeth is a type of mechusar kapara. She's lacking this kapara, which means that she has to go through the purification process. And after 40 days for giving birth to a boy or 80 days of giving birth to a girl, she brings her korban, the 2 birds, and then she could eat of the sacrifices. So every single woman who's given birth, who has a child, and has not had the opportunity to give this korban is now lacking. She's lacking this atonement. So Chazal say it's good enough that she paid the Kohanim. She put her money in the pushka so that the Kohanim will do it on her behalf, because we assume that the Kohanim are running the temple will make sure to offer all these pairs. So I see your son here. Your wife can't just join you for Korban Pesach. She'll have to also make sure to pay for her sacrifices so that she can eat the Korban Pesach with you. Right?
She has to give one.
One for each birth, or one for each pregnancy. A woman who had a substantial miscarriage also has to bring. Okay, so she counts those. But it's good enough to offer one in order to be considered purified. She still has an obligation to pay for the rest. But one is good enough to allow her to eat, I believe. Okay?
To bring one for every.
No, you can only convert once. Okay? So every time you convert. So yeah, we have quite a lot of people in this boat. So the conversion has to be done, by the way. Chazal will give an example. He should convert significantly before Korban Pesach, because he shouldn't convert that day, because there's, it says like these porish min kever. We'll see that halacha inside. And also, basically, this is saying that's coming up, I guess, God willing, it's going to affect us. Birth shortly before Pesach, so there's no chance. If it's a boy, she needs 40 days to purify. If it's a girl, that's 80 days. So what's 80 days before Korban Pesach? That's well into Shvat, right? Even before that, that's like Kislev in Teves time, depending if it's leap year or not. And the boy, a boy born after the 5th of Adar, so that's going to disqualify the woman from being able to, actually 4th of Adar, because Adar is 29 days long. That's going to disqualify her. So any woman who's giving birth, what?
At that point, she was talking.
No, women don't get knocked to Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni is not for women. If women, for whatever reason, miss Pesach Rishon, for whatever reason, like a proper reason, so that's it. Complete example. Pesach Sheni doesn't count the women. Ironically, to decide, are we going to have a Pesach Sheni? How do you know if there's a Pesach Sheni? We had to do the first Pesach properly. and the majority were Tahorim and it was done right. We count the women when we're counting to see if there's a majority to do Korban Pesach right. The first time around, Betuma, and the women count, even though they're not going to count for the circumstances that lead to Pesach Sheni. Okay. Also, we'll see those halachas inside. Yeah, it's a good question. So everybody has to know what kind of mechusar kapara you are, because you can't just go to the mikvah and say, I want to eat a Korban Pesach. This is another important thing. You go to mikvah the day before Pesach on Yud Daled Nisan, that allows you to eat Korban Pesach that night with Hariv Shemesh. Stars come out, right? When Yom Tov begins, sit down at your Seder, eat Korban Pesach. You're fine. However, if you went to mikvah that day, like I just described, you won't be able to enter the Azarah, the temple courtyard, even if they let everybody in, because we're doing the Pesach Betuma. That's referring to Tumas Mace and other Tumos. The type of Tuma you could have removed by just going to the mikvah, like Tumas Kari, which is the most common one, you should have removed the day before. So if you want to be of the people who are in the courtyard participating in Korban Pesach, go to mikvah on the 13th of Nisan, not on the 14th. Oh, it's good to go both days because, but whatever. You should go on the 13th so that you're pure already to enter the temple courtyard on the 14th. This means all the Kohanim, we need Kohanim, all the Kohanim who intend to serve on the 14th of Nisan, all the Levim who want to be singing the Hallel that day also need to attend mikvah on the 13th of Nisan, at least. And if they go to mikvah before that, they should make sure not to recontaminate themselves anytime before that. Of course, a Kohen has to go to mikvah before putting on his Kohen outfit, as we saw, right? As a tefillah for Tumas Kari. He doesn't need Hariv Shemesh for that. He's already pure. He's he's in the temple mount already. He's in the base moked. That's the dormitory next to the temple courtyard. It's just a halacha that he has to dunk every time he puts on Big Day Kahuna. He's about to put on Big Day Kahuna, he goes to the mikvah. That's also the reason why we saw who dunks the most often. Kohen Gadol. When? On Yom Kippur. He didn't get contaminated. What do you mean? He's the most pure guy in the world. Why is he dunking the mikvah 5 times in Yom Kippur? Did he get any tuma? Absolutely not. None of that's to remove tuma. It's just because he removes his clothes and he's about to put on a different set of Big Day Kahuna, so he has to go to the mikvah. So he wakes up in the morning, he's going to put on regular Big Day Kahuna, goes to the mikvah. He's going to put on Big Day Lavan, he has to go to the mikvah. Takes off his clothes, put on the mikvah. Okay, come on. Let's see. Hilchos Korban Pesach, I'm going to put this on the screen. You guys have it? It's in these Rambams. It's right at the beginning of Sefer Korbanos. I'm very excited about this. This year we could have Korban Pesach. What's stop us doing Korban Pesach this year? Our imagination. There were guys that we spoke to in Migdal about this last year. And guys said, yeah, but we have an agreement with Jordan. That's it, So I told him I don't know how to argue with that. Like, we signed away the Temple Mount. They're like, you can't do it. Don't you know what the consequences were going to be? And I said, like, we say this all the time. For some reason, even when they're making war with us on all fronts, okay, they're open about they want to kill us. And even the so-called allies and Chutzlarts are just letting them kill us. People are still worried. But if you do that, then you'll really upset them. That will cause World War III. Like, don't the Iranians aren't trying to destroy you on now? It's like that would provoke them. And by the way, what they say provoked them, what got this war? What was the thing that made them pull the trigger for this? What started on Simchas Torah? What was the thing that they're saying? I don't know how true this is. What? No. But what made? Ma? You have a gray Subaru? Someone drive a gray Subaru? Uh-oh. I don't know. What's the problem? Okay. Ostensibly, they say that really the bad guys were supposed to attack on all fronts. The Iranians and the Hezbollah and the locals around here and the Gazans, they're all supposed to wait for the signal, and then they all attack on all fronts. That would have been the big attack. But the Gazans, Yimach Shemam V'Zichram, what did they do? They jumped the gun. They attacked a little bit early. They just decided to pull the trigger now. Why'd they do that? What was the thing that really aggravated them? The Nova thing. Wait a minute, we talked about this earlier. Wasn't it? The Nova thing was like the opposite of Beis Mikdash. The Nova was the most non-Jewish thing you could possibly do in the desert. That wasn't at the temple. That provoked them. So what provokes them? When we do something that's entirely heathen and godless, away from any holy area, or when we do things that are they're proper? What makes them upset? The answer is just like Hadrian. What did Hadrian say to the Jew who gave him a greetings and the Jew who didn't? Remember the Agada there. Who was Hadrian? Biggest persecuted Jews. What? Bar Kokhba times. He was the time of Shmad, the first Holocaust. So it says a Jew gave him greetings. Okay, greetings, O Emperor. And he's like, you terrible Jew! How dare you, speak to me? And I had him killed. The next Jew saw him, was silent. Says, how dare you, Jew, not give greetings to your emperor? Had him killed. So the underlings asked Hadrian, what do you want the Jews to acknowledge you or not? They say good morning or not. And he said, don't tell me how to deal with my enemies. Your enemies don't try to psychoanalyze them and decide like that will provoke them. And this doesn't. You see that no matter what you do, they will be upset. They are provoked by us living here. The fact that we're sitting here right now, in this place, doing what we're doing right now, that's the provocation. Maybe we shouldn't do this even. Maybe we should learn Torah here, right? That upsets them, right? Yet no one ever says anything like that. It's only like the next thing. Maybe we should go do another mitzvah. No, that will upset the Goyim. That will upset them. Even though the Torah commands you and obligates you to do it as a people, that will upset them. Until now, everything was hunky-dory. But if you do that, that will upset them.
The answer to terrorism is building more houses. They've said many times that they don't want that. They hate that.
Yeah. Why don't you do what they hate? I don't know. David HaMelech, who stood for all the things that we're trying to do, including build a temple, by the way. What was David HaMelech's big project in life?
He wanted to build the temple.
Oh, build the temple. Yes, David HaMelech, his whole thing. That was his Kiddush, right? So he hated those people who God hates. He knew whom to hate. Let's see here. We mentioned until this point the idea of Korban Pesach. Let's say this outside as an introduction to what we're going to do next week. It's sort of a chiddush that the Rambam says that the Korban Pesach is done after the Tamid. If you look in the Torah, when are you supposed to offer the afternoon Tamid? Bein Harabayim. When are you supposed to offer Korban Pesach? Bein Harabayim. Same time. Oh, they're simultaneous. And then it says Korban Pesach is also eaten ba'erev. Ba'erev is more like eventime, even though sometimes erev means late afternoon. So in the Yerushalmi, Chazal have a drasha. They say that really Korban Pesach and the afternoon Tamid overlap, but Korban Pesach also is ba'erev, so it should come after the Tamid. What's the chiddush of that? Normally, the Tamid is the last thing offered in the afternoon. Aleha hashleim kol HaKorbanot kulam. That's a Mishnah. Mishnah says Korban Tamid is the last thing offered every single day. So all the sacrifices offered during the middle of the day are before the Korban Tamid of the afternoon. But Korban Pesach is the exception. And the Rambam throws in something over here. He mentions this in Hilchot Tamidim and Musafim, and he mentions it here that there's not enough time. And that's why Korban Pesach comes last. If you just give the 2 hours in the afternoon, Bein Arbayim starts at 6.5 hours of the day, half an hour into the afternoon. And normally the Talmud was 2 hours after that. That's when they start doing the whole thing with the Talmud. It takes about an hour and some to get ready to burn the Talmud. 2:30 they sacrifice it, assuming sun rises at 6 and sets at 6. Idealized day, which we could do it, but why don't we ever have a day in Israel that actually works that out? Even the day that's 12 hours long exactly, sunrise isn't at 6 and doesn't set at 6. You know why? Because we're setting our clocks to the Greenwich Meridian. The British dictate to us that it's 9 o'clock now. If we were making the clock, it would be 9:20 now. Okay, just saying. So, right? Why is it 9? Why is it 9 and not 8 now? Who decided? The British. Okay, they said that this clock is noon in Greenwich, so that's how it goes. So Rambam says there's not enough time. If you do Korban Pesach before the Talmud in those 2 hours, that 2-hour block, that wouldn't be enough time. So instead, make the Talmud earlier, and then you have more time afterwards. We'll do the calculations next time. I'll show it to you. You'll see that it doesn't really work out. There's still the same amount of time. So what's the Rambam talking about? The answer is there's one other service. It'll technically take about 2 hours to offer Korban Pesach, do the whole process. And the Talmud also is a 2-hour process. And you allow 2 hours before Korban Pesach. But Korban Pesach, besides its 2 hours, has the shtifa. What's the shtifa? They have to wash them as the courtyard of the temple, the floor. There's a lot of blood. Normally, if it's a regular day in the temple, there's a korbanos, and then there's the korban tamid. So there's some blood on the floor, right? Basic cleanup. Korban Pesach is they pack the place with Jews, and they have lines of kohanim with the cups and the blood and everything. Lots of people, millions of people, maybe participating in Korban Pesach. A lot of blood. So the last thing they do with Korban Pesach is they have to flow Zara and then clean it out, and that also adds time to it. And that has to be after Korban Pesach. If you put Korban Pesach, comes out for the Rambam. This is a very practical thing the Rambam's adding. Okay, if you do the entire Korban Pesach service for those 2 hours before you normally offer the Tamid, then you have to clean up. Then the Tamid will be offered too late. Okay, so Chazal relied on the drasha in the Rishalmi. Korban Pesach, unlike all the other korbanos, comes after the Tamid. Okay, and technically speaking, there are other korbanos also. They might make an exception. But for now, we'll leave it at that. We'll wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Pray that we live to see the rebuilding of the temple and the reinstitution of the sacrificial service, speed in our days, and the destruction of our enemies.
Amen.
Be well.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.